framework for those activities. The second kind of element of work that we do is supporting allies in their policy making and also in their decision making, to make sure that they have legal advice and to ensure that their decisions are legally well-founded. And then finally, we also lead the NATO legal community. So NATO is quite a large organization. We have offices all over our member states. I think we have over 70 legal offices. So that's a lot of legal offices to coordinate, and the office in the EIS kind of acts as a leader for all of those legal voices.
Thank you so much. All right, so now that our audience also got a chance a little bit to hear from you yourselves what you do, I'd like to go into let's say delving into the topics I've selected for the day. And the first one again is more to do with skill set, also knowledge, but all other must-haves. Now, since there are four of you, what I will usually do is select two people to answer for a question. But if any of the other two feel that you have something to share, please feel free to jump in. Yeah. So the first thing I feel that we need to acknowledge is that when it comes to this aspect of skill set and other requirements that are put in place for internships and any entry-level positions in IOs, sometimes the list is highly extensive. But there are certain elements that tend to come up again and again in job advertisements, and these relate not only to legal competence and knowledge, but also to non-legal skills. So I was wondering, for my first question, are there any particular competences and skills that you yourself think students who are aspiring for a career in IOs should really strive to build? And in particular, what do you see that young professionals or recent graduates tend to lack and you would really feel needs to be in their arsenal? And I would like to start with Paul, if you can answer this question, please, just your insight.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting one, Andrea. As you know, I do tend to get invited to a lot of panels for various different selection processes. And it's quite clear if you're talking about professional positions, but if you're talking about somebody who's just trying to get into the system as a first time, it's I mean, obviously the basic qualifications that are there. I can only speak from a legal perspective because I haven't been involved in any other sort of activity.
A large organization.
In terms of in terms of the entry requirements for internships, I think working with the European Union, we take generally quite a broad approach to it. That if you meet the minimum requirements, then you certainly are in the game. You have a very good chance of getting in there. I can't speak for any other organization, but my own experience is in relation to interns. It's very much a case of, for me personally, when I'm talking to prospective interns, that you look at their attitude, what their goals are, and what their realistic goals are. Very cognizant of the fact that it's extremely difficult to break into the international scene. That's something that I would acknowledge from the start. But apart from your attitude towards it, I tend to find that a huge amount of the decision making in terms of whether you take somebody on as an intern or not, it very much depends on the interview. And when you look at, even when you're going through applicants, which is, for me, it's one of these things, you could get 300 applicants for a position as an intern, say in the ombudsperson's office. And so you go down there and you sort of tend to look at various different key elements as to if they've had any experience in the past, in a previous internship, if they've done anything domestically. But of course, you've got to be very, very cognizant of the fact that many students just coming out of university haven't any experience and they've just gone through their academic program. And so they're coming into the field. For me, I tend, as you probably know, I tend to actually weight it in favor of people who are just coming out of the education system and actually using the internship program to give people a chance just to get in first day and have 6 months working. And if you like it, then hopefully that will stand to you on your way in. But that's my own approach. I really don't know what other people do, but most of the interns that I've taken on over the years have primarily been interns who have come out straight out of college. So for me, it's like, you know, I certainly don't look for anything. I might be unique in that regard. Maybe I'm not. But I do think, looking at most of the interns that come into our organization at the moment, most of them are coming out from the education system that haven't had, you know, 2 or 3 previous internships, or coming from some other job that they were working in. So I think primarily the internship program within the European Union anyway tends to lean a little bit towards taking people directly from third level education and sort of just setting them on the path, which for me, I think is absolutely what an internship should be about.
No, thank you for that. I think you've made a couple of good points also, because I think that the first time that you're trying to get into an international organization as an intern, but also as an entry level candidate, the issue is that everyone requires certain competences and knowledge, and the only way in which you can acquire those competences is if you actually get accepted somewhere. So at one point, this creates a sort of vicious circle in which you cannot gain the competence because, yeah, you don't have the competences to get accepted. So I think that this is also important to leave enough room for, let's say, people coming freshly off from university to gain those skills.
And sorry, just one thing
please.
I would say on that is that, you know, if any of the students are ever applying for an internship, don't be afraid to say that. You know, it's something that people sometimes tend to overlook. And then they're just looking at a CV and they're saying, oh, this person has this experience and that person. But if you're just a first-time applicant and you're trying to get into the system, don't ever be afraid to say that, because you've got to start someplace, you know. But as I say, for me, I definitely see the internship program as being that, allowing people a first-time entry.
No, true. That's very, very true. And also, you touched upon the topic of motivation, and I think that this is also important because this can make the difference. You can have 2 candidates who are equally well qualified, but if you see that one is more dedicated towards, you know, making this a possibility in their life at that point, then you will obviously tend to go for the one that shows that interest and passion in the topic.
And you do tend, to be honest, you do tend to be able to identify those people who really want it, as distinct from somebody who's just, you know, one application out of about 20 that they've probably submitted at the same time. So, you know.
Yeah, exactly. To move on to my second question, because actually this is connected to that a bit. Do you believe that it is more important for students to strictly focus on a particular and specific field that they aspire to work in? Or do you think that it's important to have more diverse knowledge and skills in order to have more possibilities out there? And I was wondering if maybe Nadia, would you like to jump in on this?
Sure, thanks, Andrea. I think Paul already mentioned a lot of interesting things that maybe I'd like to jump on. First is, you know, I understand a lot of people, it's hard to break into the international but I think what's important is when you're doing your studies, when you've got summer breaks, it's important to kind of try and get involved maybe in pro bono work, try to do some part-time jobs, be involved in law reviews, things like that, to kind of, you know, that really kind of sets you apart from other candidates and shows a little bit what kind of profile you have to offer. And I think that's really, really important. I think in terms of skills that are required, as Paul was mentioning, there's you know, there's the requirements for a job that you get in your CV, but then there's also kind of those soft skills that you often only get from the interview process, and those are kind of, you know, flexibility. I think that's really important when you're working in an international setting, being a self-starter, perseverance. A lot of times, you know, you have your eye on something and it doesn't pan out, so it's good to be able to keep, you know, your momentum and be able to kind of divert and change tack and still stay in the game. Interpersonal skills are really, really important. That's how you build networks, and that's often the key for getting by and getting kind of progressing in an international setting. And then I think also those skills that we kind of take for granted, but actually are the key to success once you're in an international organization, are writing skills. Being able to express yourself in writing and orally are so important. And I think they really are the key to success in an international organization. Now, I think I jumped a little bit too much on Paul's points, and I forgot your question. So if you can just repeat it.
So yeah, sure. No, it's not a problem. So all these questions are also food for thought. So if we start talking about something else, but it's still connected, that's absolutely perfect. So I guess the question was, should students focus more their knowledge and skill set on a particular topic and aspect in order to let's say show proficiency in a specific field, or is it better for students to try to get various experience, various points of knowledge in order to just have more possibilities to enter in this area?
I'd say that in order to really show that you've got a profile that's competitive for a particular organization that you're interested in, I think it's important to show that you have interest and skills in a specific area. But of course, that's a bit of a double-edged sword, because then you might find yourself too much zeroing in on one area and you overlook other opportunities. For example, I'm a good example of this, is that I work at NATO. I've been here for 15 years. I had no idea that I would be working for NATO when I started, my legal career. So it shows that, you need to kind of balance focus and have kind of an objective of where you want to go, where you see yourself. And then you need to be flexible and be able to take opportunities as they come up, because a lot of times you might, there's a job that you might want, and this has happened to me a lot, and you say, I really, really want it. It doesn't work out. You don't get it. And then there's another opportunity that comes up. You never would have thought about it. You do it, and it's amazing. You discover this whole kind of area that you weren't aware of. So I think it's important to kind of balance it out.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I think that a problem is that kind of the culture in which we're raised in today is a culture that really directs you to the fact that the goal that you set in mind is the goal that you need to achieve, especially depending on the cultural backgrounds that you come from. This mentality can really be embedded, in your system. But I think that the point that you're making is really good, because you need to allow yourself the actual flexibility of redirecting your course and taking control of it, rather than having an inflexible position and just sort of narrowing down basically the alternatives that you might be able to have. I would also like to ask the same type of questions to both Nikolai and Barbara, actually, especially because coming in from this program, they might also have very valuable insight, and also as legal professionals, of course. So I was wondering, Barbara, could you please also jump in on this issue of competences and knowledge, what students should try to build on? What do you usually see lacking in people who are just entering the field and things like that?
Of course, I have some thoughts to share, especially in the humanitarian and development area. You might feel very overwhelmed after you just graduated, because now you try to apply for a job and now you need a master's. So then you go ahead and do your master's. But after graduating, now you need another language and you need 7 years of experience. So it's like a never ending, and you feel very overwhelmed. It feels like you will never fulfill every requirement to apply for a job. But I would recommend to focus on building skills, not pursuing a career per se, which of course it should be part of what we are doing here, but building skills are really, really important. And I would recommend that if you're interested in a specific field, start looking at TORs of different positions that you might like and see what they are asking for. What kind of skills do you need besides the very, general knowledge in the field? Because sometimes it's even that they required a specific experience in that field. So it's not just I don't know, 7 years of experience in international organizations, but they want 7 years of experience working with in the gender area with refugees. So take a look at that. And also in terms of internship, what I was thinking is it's not always mandatory to have an internship in international organizations to get into, for example, a professional entry level. Nevertheless, it is important. What I've seen is that they do take as an asset having previous experience in international organizations in terms of humanitarian work, field experience, working previously in hardship duty stations. It's always an asset. It's not the only way to get it. This kind of experience, you don't only get it through internships. You can also do volunteer work. You can do some part-time job that might get you to build these skills. So I think that's my idea. Just build skills based on what you want. Don't focus on getting this P1 position, P2 in terms of UN. But yeah, always also look at the TORs and see what are they looking for in the specific field you might be interested.
Not true. And what you were talking about is that particularly I see this happening in entry-level jobs in the humanitarian sector, that they usually appreciate, so it's at least considered a desirable, right, attribute if you are able to show that you have worked with vulnerable communities, that you have experience on the ground and everything. And I think that sometimes people, when they see that, they think that, oh, I should have traveled to, I don't know, like somewhere across the world to have that experience. But it's not necessarily that. You can also look within your own communities and to try to build that experience, because then that experience will speak for itself when you try to get a post or an internship or a volunteer position in another country or further away. I was wondering, Nikolai, what are your thoughts about this?
Okay, so well, in my case, legal experience in the fields of public international law, treaty law, international criminal law, EU refugee law, and the Dublin system are a must, and also human rights law. But yeah, those would be the fields that you would want to specialize in if you're now studying at the Hague University. However, I don't think that anyone mentioned programming language skills, because seeing the advancement of technology, and because we now working with so many different platforms and programs on both our computers and iPads. In particular, we are working with Progress V4 or the Kobo Toolbox. So I would strongly advise the students to just put some effort into learning maybe a programming language. So that would be a very useful asset when it comes, for instance, to data management. So yeah, focus also on your IT skills. And also non-programming languages do matter, like the conventional languages like French, or more exotic ones like Arabic or Korean. So yeah, programming languages is a must. And I don't know if you want to hear my opinion about internships, because it's pretty negative.
Can you wait for that? Because that's actually like on the last theme, because I knew that this was a very charged topic, and I very much want to discuss that as well. But Nikolai, can you please develop on why do you believe it's important to have programming language, particularly for data management? Where does it come into play?
Okay, so again, probably, yeah, I didn't elaborate on this part, but we're working with a platform called Progress V4 whenever we would refer a case, and also with a platform called Kobo. And it is very, very useful when it comes to data management, when you have to work with statistical data. And actually, it is one of the requirements if you want to work in the field of information management at UNHCR. So this is one of the cases when a programming language would come in handy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
For whoever is interested, yeah, you could just Google Progress V4 or Kobo, and yeah, it will just pop up. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, this was my next thing to ask. So, how can, in your opinion, how can individuals gain those technical skills? Something that wouldn't entail investing like 5,000 euros or something like that in a professional course.
Well, I guess self-learning. I don't know. I mean, this is one of the options if you don't want to enroll in a software university. But a lot of my friends, at least, they gain a certain degree, they come back, they realize that they couldn't find a job in the field that they've studied, so they just, specialize in something different. But if in your spare time, you could always devote, your spare time to something that you're genuinely interested. So yeah, this is one of the options.
Can you hear me? Okay, now you can hear me. Sorry, I had a little bit of a glitch. Something that both Barbara and Nikolai pointed out is the need for foreign languages. I admit that when I first put together this theme, something that really was very, very prominent in my mind, at least, was the fact that in addition to legal competences like legal analysis, legal drafting, individuals need to also show non-legal skills, and one of them is actually based also, maybe it's more towards knowledge, but essentially knowledge and insight into the political context of the situation country in which the division is focused on. And this is something particularly that comes up in international organizations or divisions that focus on Eastern Europe, on countries that had to do, for example, with the Yugoslav war. And I think that also for the Kosovo specialist chambers in particular, all positions from entry level to internships, they always require, or they say that it is desirable that candidates have knowledge of the political context of the Balkans. And I am sure that this is also the case for certain sectors that work in Latin America and also in other situations. So I think that just informing yourself, keeping yourself informed of a certain region or situation that you are interested in really ends up paying off big in the long run. In terms of languages, I found it interesting that both Nikolai and Barbara pointed out this. Can you or all of you tell me whether knowing an extra language or not knowing a particular language was an advantage, respectively a disadvantage in your career? Anyone who might like to pick.
You want me to go first, do you?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, we'll do full circle. We'll come back around. For me, I have no language skills, and that includes English. So it certainly wasn't a barrier for me. Being Irish, of course, so I'm not a native English speaker. Just a technical point there. But no, when you're working with the European Union, and again, I'm coming from the EU side, so I've never worked with the UN. From the EU side, 99.9% of the activities of the Common Security and Defence Policy, which is basically the mission end of the European Union, is English speaking. So in that regard, however, Andrea, you rightly pointed out, I mean, we're crying out for people in the Kosovo specialist chambers that can speak Albanian or Serbian. I mean, honestly, it's like, it's really, really difficult to get people, and bearing in mind that we do not employ people from the region. It's part of the structure of the court, so it's staffed internationally, so it makes it even harder. So if anybody presented themselves with a law degree or some qualification and they spoke Serbian or Albanian, regardless of their experience, it would be very likely that they would get a job. However, that's a very, very specific situation that we find ourselves in with the Kosovo specialist chambers. But just from my own experience, certainly working with the European Union, English is the language really that we operate in. But I mean, it's like everything, having an additional language certainly is never going to be something that's going to hurt you. It's always going to be a plus, regardless. It just opens up it opens up your options.
Yeah, true. I think that what also happens is that as you look further ahead in your career, right? So the more you progress, your skills and knowledge kind of tend to compensate, you know, for a specific, let's say, lack of a language. So then the expertise that you can bring in becomes so valuable, right? So I think that also the language requirement, usually they're higher when you're trying to access the career and the international organization. But I was wondering also for the rest, what are your opinions of this?
I can gladly go up, just quickly saying that I think that it also depends on your background, and I can speak coming from a developing country. We don't have the same opportunities as other developed or European countries in terms of entry positions. For example, we don't have a junior program that accelerates your career paths or everything. So maybe, and for students that come out from different developing countries, you feel like you need to offer a bit more in those areas, which is not absolute. Of course, I know that it will, at the end of the day, will depend on what you have to offer forward with, but it is also helpful. In my experience, in terms of speaking Spanish, it's of course been an advantage and a necessity for working in Latin America, except for Brazil, but for most countries in Latin America. Nevertheless, it's kind of being a double-edged sword in terms that there are not many GBV specialists. Like my work is really specific. So since there are not many GBV specialists, Spanish speakers, I kind of feel trapped in this region. And whenever I try to apply for other positions in my field, for example, the Middle East or Africa, language does become a barrier. Well, Africa not that much, because I do have some French skills, but I do not possess Arabic. That sometimes it's a mandatory requirement. So yeah, just wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, that's very true. I also saw that, for example, with the international investigative mechanism that focuses on Syria, right, which looks into the crimes or, you know, committed by Daesh, it is such an interesting organ and it works with such interesting events. But most of the time, especially for entry-level positions, they want Arabic. Which makes sense because most likely the volume of evidence that is there is in Arabic, so they need someone who is able to understand really swiftly. And yeah, I can completely understand that. And now I'm curious what Nadia thinks, because when I was interning at NATO, we were told that both English and French are really big at NATO. But whenever I discussed with individuals and where I interned and was active, English was more than enough. So I'm wondering, Nadia, what is your opinion coming from the NATO perspective?
So I think it depends on where you're working. So in a headquarters setting, what I've noticed, for example, at NATO, it definitely is an asset to have both languages, because French and English are both the official languages. But what I have noticed is when there's a competition for a candidate, if you have a candidate that has really strong skills but doesn't have the French, you overlook that. So I think language is good. It's kind of a good to have, but it's not really the game changer. And it's really about your hard skills that you offer. I'd say that that's really different, or I'd maybe give a different nuance to that if you're working in the field. Because when I started my career, I was working in the Balkans and also in Afghanistan, and we were doing electoral complaints adjudication. And so the fact that we didn't speak the language was actually good, because it kind of gave us this impartiality. And it also meant that we had to rely on local staff, local lawyers for their language skills. And so it was really, there was an important capacity building element there. And also an important kind of cultural plug-in. So you're working in tandem with local staff that give, you know, credibility, but you still have kind of that impartial element to it. So I think language is an important, it's an important concept, but I'd say it depends on where you want to work, whether it's more in a headquarters setting or in the field. And I think there's different kind of factors that need to be taken into account.
And what was your experience? Did you ever feel in your work that you would have wanted to learn an additional language, that it would have benefited you in a certain specific way in your progress in your career?
It's funny you say that because throughout my whole career, I've been a committed language learner, but interested in learning the language, never acquiring it. So for example, when I was in Afghanistan, I really wanted to learn Dari. When I was in Turkey, I really wanted to learn Turkish. I wanted to learn Arabic. So I've always been interested in languages. I'm not good at it. So, you know, but I think just having the interest also kind of gives you that cultural openness. Which I think is really appreciated by people, you know, when you're in a country. I think it's really appreciated when you show that interest.
Yeah, that's definitely that's definitely true. And I also think, for example, that one of the difficulties in picking up a language is that, I mean, realistically speaking, it also, of course, depends on your inclination towards languages, but also on the languages that you pick. It's a slow journey. So the progress is not fast. It is not a quick fix. You're going to go through moments where you can barely utter 3 words together, and that might discourage you. So also like putting up with that and putting the effort in it. I mean, it's quite a battle, right, to acquire a foreign language. The more you how I say, the older you get, also like the harder it is to acquire a language, because I studied French 2 or 3 years ago, and it was hugely difficult, even though it's still part of the same family language as Romanian, my own native language. It was still a struggle. So yeah, like I completely get that. And one more question. Please, Paul, go ahead.
Pick up on what Nadia said there about when you're working in the field and having this, you know, appetite to learn the local language. And I felt the very same way when I was working in various different countries. And I always found from my own experience that even if you made an attempt to sort of put one sentence together, the amount of value that would be to you, because your partners and the people that you were working with, and it's amazing how much they value that. And it's only a very small thing. So I would never have embarked on going to learn, you know, any language that in the country from which I was living in. But even just to be able to ask a taxi driver at something, or your local counterpart, to be able to say hello and wish them a greeting in the local, it's the value of that. But again, that sort of a skill set in itself in building bridges with people. But it's hugely significant. But I think in terms of, you know, learning a language and going to a country, I don't think it's necessary in many occasions. But you do have to be very cognizant of that fact, that you really do have to show some respect and make the effort. For minimal effort, you'll get maximum return.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. And I remember that, Paul, whenever I saw you interacting with people, at least in the context of the Kosovo chambers, no matter where they came from, I always felt like you put a little bit of effort of saying something in their language, or asking them how to say something in their language. And all of a sudden you could see that the person just became a little bit more open and relaxed. And it was part of that thing that you were talking about with building bridges, which is really, really important. One more question on this point. From your experience, all of you, when recruiting interns or young professionals, candidly, how much do recommendations from personal or professional connections count?
Will I take it again?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, it was actually something I was going to say in my first response to you. And if I was to give advice to anybody looking for an internship, if you network, if you know somebody that might know somebody, don't ever be afraid. And certainly from my experience, I would never take umbrage to anybody picking up the phone to me and saying, listen, I know a good guy, or I know a good girl, she worked with me during the summer, or whatever. That's really important to me, depending, of course, on, you know, who I'm getting the phone call from. So, but it's something that people shouldn't, in my view, you should not be afraid of, because for me, that's not canvassing. It's you're trying to get started in an organization or embarking on a journey. And yet it is important for me from time to time. I've certainly, and you asked to be honest on this, I've certainly taken on interns on the recommendation of people that I know and that I've worked with previously. And I can say I've never had a bad experience taking on somebody coming on a recommendation. because I know from my perspective, I certainly wouldn't recommend somebody unless I could stand over it. So I think that whole process, sometimes interns and young professionals are a little bit scared of that whole networking element, which as you go on in your career, you know, it's it just goes on all the time, you know, and the international organizations, you know, especially in places around the Hague, it's a very, very small community. So yeah, for sure, I don't see anything wrong with it, and I certainly, sometimes I value it when I have 350 applicants. It's sometimes nice to be able to get, you know, 2 or 3 that somebody can vouch for, because ultimately you're probably going to embark on sort of checking out somebody before you hire them anyway. So it rather than me looking to try and contact somebody that might know the applicant, it's sometimes easier if I get a phone call from somebody who knows the applicant and can stand over them. So yeah, recommendations I think are huge.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, this is also something that I noticed a lot, especially in certain internships where we would all get together and it would be like, how did you get here? So sometimes people did come in through recommendations from, and not only what you might think of as like nepotism or something like that, but it was simply because, for example, they had a lecturer who knew someone in the organization who then recommended them, and so on and so forth, and did so really candidly. So then that's how the person managed to get in. But then my true question is, what does it mean to network? Because you hear this a lot, and every single time we hear it, many of us, we just cringe at the idea. So what does it mean to network in like a real, I don't know, in a seamless, genuine way that is part and parcel of who you are, you know? So how does that, how would you explain that? Nadia, would you please like to try?
I think, and I've learned this late, the best way to network is to follow up with people, to send an email. You know, if you have a professor that you really liked, send them an update. Hey, I'm doing this, you know, and then keep that contact. It's simple. It's genuine because you kind of, you know, you want to share news, you want to keep contact. But I think, and I've seen it, that's really the best way to network. And it's not difficult. It's just when you meet someone that you've kind of connected with, or someone that, you know, you're leaving university and you want to keep contact with your professors, make sure to just keep that email contact. It's easy and it's really important. And I would just echo what Paul said. I think don't be embarrassed to use recommendations, because from the outside you often think, well, it's so difficult to penetrate, you know, the international career arena. But when you're in it and you have a project and you're looking for people, you say, I need, you know, 5 skilled people. Where am I going to find them? And often the recommendations are where the first kind of place that you go. And, you know, like Paul was saying, you can pretty much rely, if it's people you respect, you can rely on the recommendations. And it's usually a good way to get highly skilled people quickly. So.
True. Thank you. Barbara, what is your opinion?
I completely agree with Nadia and Paul. It's really, really important to try to stay connected with people that you meet in different environments. And I will also say that when you're working within a small community of international actors, try to look for places where these actors meet. I mean, not necessarily in professional places, but also, I don't know, I meet a lot of people here from yoga class, and that's where part of the networking happens. Even if you're at a party, you're exchanging some information, and then that helps me, because someone asked me, do you know someone from ICRC? Oh, yeah, I met this guy at this party. So do you know someone that works in health? Yes. And that's how networking has been really, really successful for me, especially in places, in humanitarian stages or developing places where the international community tends to float in the same areas. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, true. And I think that this is particularly the case also in cities that have a large concentration of expats, who work in international organizations. This is Brussels, of course, this is Geneva, this is also The Hague. And it is very true that these cities are essentially bubbles of individuals from international organizations, and you can find them everywhere and anywhere. So it's really easy to also establish those connections. One more thing here, or actually, no, you know something, I'm gonna move on, but then I might come back to it a little later because I'm very cognizant of the time and I would have so many questions. Paul, you wanted to say something, go ahead.
Yeah, just very quickly before you get off this topic, we're talking about networking, and I'll just give you an example. I do quite a lot of this speaking with students and this, and I could count on one hand the amount of people that would contact me afterwards as students, probably potentially looking for a job. And for me, one of those whole aspects is like a platform like today. So I'm not sure how many people are here because I can't see anybody on the screen. But why would you not, at some point, for the panel members here, why would you not take a chance of just even trying to reach out? I'm not advocating that we get floods of emails from people or whatever, but this is what I'm talking about when you're talking about networking. If you're at an event with somebody and you're interested in what they're doing, why not follow up with them? Why not try and reach out? It may not come to anything, but it may come to something. And at least you're on the radar.
I will tell you why people are generally hesitant with this. I think that it's the idea that they don't want to bother, they don't want to seem sleazy or anything like that. What would you have to say to these people who are shy, who are timid about reaching out and just saying, I heard you speak on the panel, I loved your ideas?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's best to start off with a compliment if you're emailing me, and that probably gets you halfway down the road. No, I'm joking on that, but honestly, don't ever be scared. I think Nadia and Barbara were also okay with this. Don't be scared. You know, networking and reaching out this is not a dirty thing. This is not a dirty word. It's something that if you want to get on and you want to get out of the pack, you've got to make it happen yourself. It's not going to land. I'm not going to email anybody that's on this platform today, but certainly you have an opportunity to email any of us. So just don't be scared of that. Have the confidence in your own ability. But that is the networking. And as Nadia and Barbara also said, you know, there are various other ways of doing it, keeping in touch and with your professors and in social events. But it's really important because there are so many people trying to break in. You've got to make yourself relevant. You really have to make yourself relevant.
True. And Nikolai, because you come from the perspective of the UNHCR, what is your opinion on this topic?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, you know, I'm not really good at networking. Maybe it's because I'm a little bit shy, a little bit timid, as you already mentioned. But for me, it was actually pure luck because I've applied for a position at UNHCR about 3 times, you know. And on the 3rd time, actually, while I was being interviewed, you know, the name of a lecturer in The Hague popped up in the conversation. A lecturer who taught refugee law. So the representative was Dutch and he knew the lecturer. So maybe that played a role, you know, in my in my later career. Yeah. So, but again, as far as networking is concerned, you know, I'm not one to, you know, write emails or chase someone. You know, I just go through the, you know, whatever the channel is, the traditional channel is. But again, luck plays a role as well. Yeah.
If I can just like take something from what everyone said. So I guess the idea is that you should always try to put yourself out there, to reach out to individuals, express interest, express appreciation, but also do what feels comfortable. So if at a certain stage, for example, you don't feel like you want to do that, then maybe that's not the time yet. So, but in the future, maybe you can build it up to that point. Or not. It also depends. I mean, it also is about staying true to your style, right? Because otherwise you can always sound fake or seem fake when you try to reach out. But in essence, you should always try to, you know, again, put yourself out there. You never know what you can find. Now let's move on to the second theme, which relates to inclusivity, or you can view it as diversity as well. And something that made me think about this theme in particular was the fact that in October 2020, an expert report came out regarding the work and functioning of the International Criminal Court. And what was interesting about this report was that it was put together by a panel of experts, and a lot of attention was paid to its publication, because it was for the very first time that, as reporters and commentators pointed out, the lapses, not only the pluses of an organization, were jotted down so candidly and in such a straightforward manner. And among other aspects, something that stood out was the fact that particular sections in the ICC were particularly suffering from a lack of cultural diversity, with many posts actually being filled with representatives from Western countries who had received a Western education, to the detriment of representatives from countries from Latin America and Africa and other areas of the world. And this information was in no way new. I think that often enough in international organizations, we tend to see, or at least tended to see, a lack of cultural diversity. But I believe that the issue is sometimes much broader, including also a lack of gender diversity in certain positions and divisions, something which is well documented, but also concerns relating to the inclusion of people with disabilities. And I'm not talking about just physical disabilities, but also learning disabilities and other types of disabilities as well. On this topic, my first question is, going back to this issue of cultural diversity, based on your opinion, what does your organization do in order to encourage diversity? In particular, how and to what extent do you believe that your organization is trying to function as an entry point for people from a diversity of cultural backgrounds? Barbara, would you like to open up, please?
Thanks. I think it's a really, really important topic that it doesn't necessarily is part of the main talks within an organizations beyond the rhetoric of every organization. So, in terms of UNICEF, we do work with a very diverse staff. I think that the diversity is more obvious at HQ positions, and not so much in field positions, since they try to hire like local staff. Well, if you take into account local staff, and also the requirements of language and cultural sensibility, you might see more of less diverse staff within field positions. But nevertheless, we are trying to understand the root causes of the different barriers that different groups might face, especially talking from a gender point of view, from an ethnicity, a race point of view. And we are, for example, UNICEF was the first UN agency to receive an EDGE certification, that is a leading global assessment in business certifications in terms of gender equality. Right now, the latest data, we stand at 47.9% women and 52 men. Nevertheless, that's more quantitative than qualitative. If you look, what does that percentages mean? We still need to move on into most of the positions that women take are on P1 and entry-level positions, that compared to more manager and director positions. And this is a problem not only with UNICEF but with UN in general, and I think that maybe other international organizations might face. There's even a study that show up that women face much more challenges in order to progress in their career. And for example, this study from Impact Pool, I don't know if you know this, which I recommend students to if they're looking for jobs in humanitarian development, search for Impact Pool. But they made a study and show up that There were not very marked differences between the skills and experience between men and women. Nevertheless, the men progress much faster in their careers, so they have like 6 times. They were 6 times more likely to become a D1 or a P5 within the UN than women. So, well, there are, of course, cultural and social. There's the cultural and social context. A lot of women leave for family reasons, or they don't apply for a specific position because it would mean that they will have to move, and it's easier for men to ask their families to move with them than with women. But they also found that there are more single women within the UN than men. There are more men with families working at the UN than women. So that's still a challenge. It's still, but we are trying to look at this, to push at this. We have different networks also for employees with disabilities, for people that have children with disabilities, not only employees itself. And also we are also paying attention to our young staff. So there's this program for young UNICEF for professionals under 35 to help them progress within their career, taking into account what we said, that they don't have as many years of experience. So we're trying to strengthen their skills so they can progress within their organization.
Thank you. As part of the section that you were discussing on gender parity, so again, I know that this is an issue that has received a lot of attention in the last couple of years at the level of international organization. And one question that I would have for all the panelists is the following. So actually, I'll first tell you why I thought about this question. So when I was interning at NATO for the first time rolled a program focused on mentorship for women who are in the organization, especially interns, entry level, but also higher up. And in that same division, I had a colleague who was male, and he was quite upset because he said that I can't apply for it. And I would love to be able to make a buddy, to be able to talk to someone from a senior level and get their opinion on my CV, on my style, on everything. And yet I'm not given this opportunity. You can like actually go ahead and apply and receive that. So I was wondering, what would you say is a particular challenge that women, particularly young graduates or entry-level staff, face in this area of international organization? But at the same time, what do you believe is a particular challenge that men face in the field? Would anyone like to pick up on that question?
Maybe I can come in, Andrea, because you mentioned your experience at NATO, the mentorship program, and I remember that was it caused quite a stir. And I'm happy to say now that the mentorship program is open to everybody. So that has been changed, and I think everyone is taking advantage of it. But I think in terms of challenges, I think it depends on the organization. I think at NATO, what people often struggle with is when I joined NATO 15 years ago, you had a lot of older, men with military backgrounds. That was, NATO was essentially composed of former military officers, and that has changed radically. We're nowhere near where we should be. But I think now we've done a lot of work through our diversity task force and our annual programs on which we're accountable to nations. In recruiting younger people, putting in place a really successful internship program, young professional programs. We also had sometimes some fellowships. So we've really done well to kind of rejuvenate the workforce, which is good. But I think in terms of challenges, what happens when you arrive at NATO, you still have that military kind of older and military approach. And if you're not older and if you're not military, you're immediately in a disadvantage. And that's both for men and for women. And that often, and what hurts is that it's often an attack on your credibility. So you have to, as a young, enthusiastic person, you have to try and overcome that gap, that you have to make sure that you're taken seriously by your colleagues, which are older and have that military background. But things have changed a lot recently. But as something that Barbara said, one of the things that I find still kind of problematic is the difficulty for women to achieve management positions. I mean, that is really, there's a lot of studies that are done on that, but I see it over and over. The male colleagues are always, and I don't know if it's just confidence, but they tend to get those management positions, and women don't, maybe because they don't position themselves for the positions. I don't know, but I think that's something that all international organizations struggle with.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that they made the mentorship program more diverse again, because I know that my colleague was really suffering because of that. So that's good to hear. Nikolai, what is your opinion about this?
Well, UNHCR has a specific policy on gender and diversity when it comes to persons of concern. And yeah, diversity is critical to protecting, our people, our persons of concern in response to, humanitarian crisis. But I guess you retext it more, in the working environment. And yeah, I work best by providing examples. So in order to answer this question, I can just, enumerate all my colleagues. So my supervisor is a woman from Uzbekistan, with solid international experience. The current representative is from India. The former representative, as I already mentioned, was Dutch. And also at some point we had an Iraqi, working for us, and a couple of painters from the US. And actually, yeah, the colleague that I'm a part of the protection team with is half Bulgarian and half Yemeni. And also a couple of years back, before COVID-19, we had a retreat in the Czech Republic. And I'm certain that it was mentioned that over 40% of the regional UNHCR workforce, that being Central and Eastern Europe, is composed of women. And now UNHCR is also working on giving women the opportunity actually to reach top tier and more leading managerial positions. So yeah, there's one value that we appreciate and promote, not only among our persons of concern, but also among colleagues. It is diversity. And as far as particular challenges that female colleagues go through in the field, I could not really pinpoint any, but I have heard from colleagues that in the peak of the Bulgarian refugee crisis, which was in between 2013 and 2016, sometimes they had to meet up with over 100 people a day and try to ensure and provide, the necessary medical and legal aid to our implementing partners, as I already mentioned. So some have shared that when surrounded by over, 30 hungry, desperate people who had embarked on a month-long journey, and are eager to have their demands met, well, they feel threatened. So though it may sound a bit stereotypical, safety is an issue for women in the field. And also other challenges, well, they include diseases like hepatitis and scabies and now COVID-19. And it is also an issue for both genders. And again, when you embark on a month or even year-long journey, you go through all sorts of challenges, including, transmittable diseases. And when we meet with those people, exchange phones, speak to each other in a confined space, those diseases could easily be passed on to you or to your family. And yeah, by the way, I did go to COVID-19 and it was not a pleasant experience. It is not a mouse flu. So diseases present a challenge for both genders and also for the families. Yeah. And as far as men are concerned, I go through a very specific problem, that being my inability to speak to particular SGBV cases. So, of course, I'm forbidden by my organization to discuss those, but it is logical that if you're, for instance, a woman with an Arab ethnicity who has gone through such a terrible experience, she would not want to share it with a man. Though I would explain to her, that it is so confidential and anonymous, and I would not disclose her identity. And by the way, I'm forbidden to disclose such identities also with colleagues in the office. So I just speak about those cases to my protection team. So yeah, when I identify such cases, I refer them to my female colleague. And yeah, we also have these standard operating procedures, SOPs we call them, which we refer to when we're in doubt. And yeah, I believe some of them are public, so you can again Google them. But overall, UNHCR is committing to achieving and maintaining gender parity at all grades, and to have a workforce that is diverse, inclusive, and representative of all regions.
No, true. That's where I see that the trend definitely is that, at least compared to 10 years ago or 5 years ago, international organizations are really trying. And that goes in a certain direction because that is the start of actually making and implementing adequate change, right? So offering more equal chances for everyone. At 6:15, I will talk about the last theme, and that relates to tracks and challenges in accessing a career in international organization. And I will keep it to 2 questions here. The first one is, so there is a lot said about the need and potential advantage of doing an internship in international organization. As outsiders, you usually get the impression that if you do an internship, this is a gateway towards getting that much coveted entry-level position in an international organization. Is this so? What has been your experience? What are some of the pitfalls? Let's see. Paul, would you like to start?
Yep. To an extent, it is true that the internship is a pathway to full-time employment. Certainly in the organization I work with at the moment, in the Kosovo Specialist Chambers, quite a few of the interns have gone on to get full-time employment in the organization. But within the European Union, it's slightly different in terms of how you actually get into all of these CSDP missions. There are a number of avenues to go, and we may discuss that with your second question. I don't want to go down that path at the moment, but for me, it's within the European Union. It's certainly not something that's essential, so you can easily get a job within one of the CSDP missions, including the Kosovo Specialist Chambers, without having done an internship. There are pathways that I'm not sure are available in other organizations, but the internship, it does help. And yeah, quite a number of people have gone on to continue work there, but it's certainly not essential within the European Union.
Thank you. And Barbara, because I saw that you were smiling and nodding, so I figured that there was a lot to say there as well.
Yes, I was just remembering my own experience when I really thought that I needed to make as much internship as I could while I didn't get an entry-level position. But at the end of the day, I think it's what Paul says, just said. It's important. It might be an asset, especially in terms of knowing how the organization works. It's not only knowing the mandate, but sometimes it's the very tricky administrative, bureaucratic systems that we work in, that understanding that and will give you an advantage. And for example, knowing all the internal work, the internal idioms within the UN. When I first worked at the UN mission in Colombia, I remember everybody saying, just check off the TOR and then speak to a lot of language that I didn't understand, and I felt really overwhelmed. So it is helpful, but as Paul mentioned, it's not necessary. You can also try to do some volunteer work, and especially even if you work in other organizations, that might be something that the UN or the organization, the international organization, might be interested. I'm talking about doing work with NGOs, not only volunteer, but also other work with NGOs, small organizations that might give you the skills and might also help you to get an entry-level position at a big international organization.
The thing is that when I was looking over your bios and everything, so something interesting that I saw was, and I don't know if any of you picked up on this, but the idea is that you don't only have international experience. Actually, what all of you have in common is that you also have national experience. And it seems that having national experience sometimes carries a long way in getting a career in an international organization, especially in the legal sector, because particularly if you were considered, let's say, trustworthy enough and good enough to work for your national authorities, usually this can extend and translate into working for an international organization. And I was wondering, Nikolai, what are your thoughts about this?
Well, actually, speaking of, my national experience, I actually was sort of forced to do it because when I was working for the Constitutional Court, they just made me qualified. So that's basically it. But as far as again, I already mentioned that I have very negative, opinion of internships because internship does not equal a job. And I have done like a total of 5 internships at a notary firm here in Sofia, just to get like summer pocket money. Also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which was unpaid. The permanent mission, permanent Bulgarian mission at the UN, which was also unpaid. The Center for the Study of Democracy, which was also unpaid, and Eurojust, which was also unpaid. So apart from, the fact that you cannot really support yourself through an internship and be financially independent, actually, on the contrary, my internship in Geneva cost me a lot of money. I had to sleep in Lyon, which is a 40-minute train ride from Geneva because, the rent was lower there, and it was still really expensive. And I think that is what students are interested because financial issues are real issues which matter. So, but apart from the money problem, which is an issue for more students, I do not believe that you gain substantial experience by doing an internship. In most places, they just tell you to sit at the site, make coffee or go do your university work. So yeah, as you can see, my experience is pretty negative. You basically lose money and gain ultimately no experience.
I don't know what to say about that, to be honest. Like, my experience has been, and I can see Paul as well going like, no, I think, so I would like to nuance that a little bit. And Paul, then I'll give you the floor. Sorry that I just like jumped in there. The idea is that I think it is a gamble, for one thing. You have to, but this, so like in hindsight, I would advise students to also go by word of mouth, in the sense of go in the organizations where you know that internships are good and give you the proper skill sets, and go in the divisions that do that. For example, so my experience interning in chambers has been really, really good, especially at the trial stage. So there we were really used, as much as we used is the wrong word, but we were actually given meaningful, good work. It was the same experience, for example, when I interned with, for Paul in the Kosovo Specialist Chambers, but also in general, anywhere where I had work in a legal office, including at NATO. Conversely, for example, when I interned at the embassy, there it was very, very difficult to get actual experience. So for example, my personal advice for students would be that if you do want to pursue an internship, try to find out as much as possible about that internship beforehand to see if it's going to be worth the money and the time, because it's quite expensive, right? Paul, would you like to jump in?
I won't jump in, but I'll join in. I understand what you were saying in respect of internships, and as Andrea, you know this from our time together. It's something that I'm very passionate about with internships, and a lot of it I see is almost exploitation, where you have the experiences that you had, where you're not getting any pay, so it's costing you a lot of money, and many times you're sidelined. But on the other side of it, as Andrea said, if you can get the right internship, it's a huge value to you. So say, for example, where we are at the moment in the Kosovo Specialist Chambers, the interns are paid. I'm not sure how much they're paid, but I think they get paid enough to keep them going for the month. And also, I think that certainly I know from my own experience, and I've had many interns working with me. I think I can safely say after 6 months of working in the office that they've had a really, really good experience, and they have also developed. So of course there are many internships. I know with my own kids, would I support them if they were going to go off to Geneva and it was going to cost me, a lot of money? I'm not sure I would be encouraging to do that. So there is a flip side, but there are some good internships out there. And regardless of whether they lead to a full-time position, I think the person goes out a lot better and a lot more experienced than they did come in it. So I understand that there are bad experiences, but there are also many, many good experiences for internships.
Yeah, true.
Just jump in because I made it sound overly negative. Yeah. So basically, in the UK, for instance, there are these summer schemes if you want to pursue a job, you know, at a Magic Circle law firm, and you have to apply 2 years in advance. And the summer scheme is an internship of sorts, you know. So yeah, you have to apply earlier, but it has the potential, if they like you, to land a traineeship contract after you graduate. So this is like an internship that would be really useful, you know, and I wish I had known it in advance. But I mean, what I meant is, do not go through an internship just for the sake of it, you know, just for, you know, completing an internship. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah, no, because sorry, so I wanted to go back to what you said in the sense that so I can understand why you made it sound that negative, because getting a bad internship is a terrible experience. I mean, especially if you signed on for something like 6 months, especially if you signed up somewhere expensive, that depletes your financial resources, right? And it can leave an impact, you know, on your desire to work with international organizations in the field and everything. So that's why I don't know, that would be my key advice for students, especially the ones that are have the advantage of having lecturers that worked in international organizations or have contacts to just ask and see, or, you know, older colleagues, what were the good places to go and intern and get that experience. So I think that can offset some of that, yeah, let's say potential for negative things to come up. May I ask from the speakers, would you happen to have 10 more minutes? 15 tops. Yes? Okay, thank you so much. I wanted to ask one more question, but I might just leave it as my last question. Because what I'd like to do is give the floor to Alexandra to ask maybe 2 questions that came up from the audience. Alex, would you like to try and see if the microphone works? And if it doesn't, it is not a problem. We can find an alternative.
Right.
Nadia, would you like to chip in?
Sure. I think tips, a lot of it is on luck, unfortunately, because I know for us, and this goes again to some of the points that people said in terms of getting a rewarding internship. A lot of times you apply to an internship program and your experience depends on your manager. And then after, whether you get a job, it depends on whether there's opportunities in that area, whether there's funding. So a lot of times it's luck of the draw, but that doesn't mean it's a lost cause, because I think you can do a lot to make yourself known. If you've got those good interpersonal skills, if you're a self-starter. I mean, I was amazed when I came to NATO. I thought, you know, it's such a bureaucratic organization. You get kind of direction from the top, but actually, people are really open to new ideas, to initiatives that you might want to propose, to say, hey, I noticed that we're not very heavy on this. You know, I propose to do a project on that. So I think you need to show that you're a self-starter, that you're ready to go out and position yourself where there might be, you know, those resources for positions. So you really need to have your ear to the ground, build that networking within the organization, and you know, be a self-starter. I think those are my key tips for once you're in an internship, if you want to find a job and secure a job in the organization itself.
Very much. And as a follow-up for that, if students have diverse interests and the options that they have are very wide as well, what can help you to decide what field is the right for you, or what international organizations is the one to pick?
Barbara and Nikolai? So if an organization is very large, how can you navigate exactly, let's say, what division is the right one for you and what, legal sector would be the right one? This is, I feel like, a very personal question that can really come down just to interests and, but any thoughts?
Well, it might not even be a legal sector. I mean, I would just give the example that I provided in our last session. So when I was a fourth year student, in the Hague, I actually had to write my thesis, and on the Syrian and Libyan wars. And my supervisor, Mr. Fagias, he said that it was written from a purely, international relations and politics perspective. So that's why I decided to go for a master's in this field. So my advice would be just to experiment with different fields of law and also different fields altogether, and also extracurricular activities, and just see what happens afterwards.
And Barbara, how did you decide for your specific organization and your specific field?
I think that was part of the experience I had, but also finding very inspiring lectures, for example, within both my bachelor and my master's students. I don't know if she still works with the university. I think she's not, but Miss Hayes-Klein, Hermie Hayes-Klein, was one of the first persons that spurred me towards gender studies, towards equality. So that ignited. Plus, that's been part of the things I do, both in my personal and also my professional life. So I try to float around this kind of areas, but nevertheless, finding other skills, not just one trick pony, trying to know about other things that might be helpful within your career is really important. So you don't have to be only interested in one, but also taking into account that there's a very fine line in trying to be, knowing from everything, but not being a specialist in anything could also be dangerous. So look for things that inspire you, that really interest you, and follow what might be a career in that. And you will maybe discover that you're interested in more things that you thought at first sight. But also ask your lecturers, what is it to work in this field? What is it to, if they know other people that might give you, not necessarily recommendations, but might give you an idea of what in reality means doing what you do or what you want to do.
Sonia, do I have time for one more?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Okay. So this one is more personal. It is addressed to Mr. Landers. Person who asked this says, I'm a native Albanian speaker and I'm really looking forward to an internship at the Kosovo Specialist Chamber. What would you say my odds are as an Albanian? And where should I put my focus on in order to obtain?
So can I just clarify, is that question coming from an Albanian speaker or an Albanian citizen? And it's quite important.
Yes, I understand. It first says that later on they're asking what are the odds as an Albanian, so I assume.
Oh, okay. Well, it's quite clear. The answer in that one is that there is no possibility, and it's for legal reasons, because the employment regime within the Kosovo Specialist Chambers is governed by the Common Security and Defence Policy recruitment regime of the European Union. Because of the structures of the court and the agreement between Kosovo and the European Union on the establishment of the court, part of that agreement was that the court would be funded by the European Union, and therefore the employment regime that exists is limited to citizens of EU member states and citizens of contributing states, of which there are 4 or 5, US, Canada, Turkey, Norway, Sweden, I think. So if you are not from that cohort of countries, you are prohibited from employment in the Kosovo Specialist Chambers. However, people who have dual citizenship and one of them happens to be an EU citizenship, then there is an entry point for you. But if it's just an Albanian, or indeed it's not, and this applies to any other country as well as Albania, so any country which is not a member of the European Union or contributing state, they are not eligible for employment in the court. I hope that answers the question. And just as an aside to that this employment regime of the CSDP of the European Union has been looked at by the European Court of Human Rights and has been deemed to be compliant with the European Convention. So in terms of discrimination and that it has been adjudicated on.
Paul, can I ask you something? Is the same requirement in place for defense teams? I know the chambers is not defense is not chambers, but just as an idea.
Good question. Now, no, it's not, because there are local lawyers. Yeah, there are local lawyers employed. Yeah,
yeah.
But again, the funding, and it's very good point actually. Yeah, because there are Albanian lawyers and but defense. So I'm not sure how you get employed as a defense lawyer, or certainly as I'm sure with lead counsel that they put their teams together and they probably employ those people. So it's not actually the European Union that's employing them, I'm sure. But yeah, for sure, you're right there. Good point.
Thank you. One final question from my end. I would like all of you to think back. Sorry, this was the slide I was supposed to put before. I would like you all to think back to when you started working in international organizations, or just before that, right? And I want you to maybe tell me, what was the main challenge you faced as a recent graduate or young professional to try to enter a career in an international organization? And what did you do to overcome it? And it doesn't have to be a super expansive argument. It can be as short and to the point as possible. What was the challenge? What did you do to get over it, to surmount it? Let's see, Nadia.
It's an easy answer, and it comes out from our discussion we had, a lack of experience, and so I did an internship. And if it wasn't for that internship, I never would have been able to break into the international, in an international career.
All right, interesting, thank you. Barbara.
I think for me I was really afraid to apply just because I didn't fulfill with every single requirement, with the ginormous list of requirements, until I say, okay, what the hell, I'm just going to apply and see until I receive my first call. I do some interviews. Not every interview was successful, but they were really helpful. It's also a skill, mastering skills for successful interviews. It's important. So just go ahead and try. And the worst thing is that you're gonna receive a rejection letter, or sometimes not even that. But just go ahead.
Sure, thank you, Nikolai.
Just a question: are we speaking before actually landing the job or afterwards?
Before actually landing the job.
Okay. Well, again, I've submitted like over 400 applications since I came back to Bulgaria. So in my case, persistence was the major characteristic that actually landed me this job. And I've applied to UNHCR like 3 times. So my advice would be, just don't worry about screwing up. Basically, I mean, I've done like so many interviews, and tests, and if it doesn't happen on the first occasion, it would happen on the second one. So just be persistent. I mean, this would be my piece of advice.
Thank you. And Paul?
For me, probably slightly different in that I quite long career domestically, so I wasn't coming in as a young professional. And I joined the European Union's international program as a secondee from my foreign ministry. So we have a panel of experts that we supply to the European projects. So it's like, it wasn't really a big deal for me in terms of, just obviously from a family perspective, it's a huge thing to be moving away from home. But apart from that, from employment perspective, it wasn't really a big deal. So I was kind of working in that field anyway. I was just transferring from Dublin to wherever.
Thank you. So to wrap up, what I got from this discussion is that we can have certain takeaways. In terms of skill set, what we learned was that it takes a blend of legal and non-legal skills, with language sometimes being very important and sometimes less important, depending on the organization that you are applying for and the region in which you want to work with. What is definitely certain is that networking from early days, even from the moment of your studies, really, really helps. But it also helps to expand that network and also reach out to other individuals who you meet in regular circumstances, or who you might get acquainted with via a panel like this or other options as well. Finally, something that was an important takeaway is the fact that the experience that can get you there, it can vary. I see that all 4 panelists had their own unique experience. For some, it was the internship that did it. For others, the internship did not matter. But again, what we can take away from this with certainty is the fact that a blend of experience seems to be the go-to way. It is very useful to try to get some national experience through internship, volunteer positions with communities, with NGOs, and then also to have an international experience, such as an internship, in your arsenal. And one last thing with regards to what Nikolai was saying earlier with regards to internship, my personal recommendation would be try to look and aim for, first and foremost, for internships that are actually paid. Not that they will be paid to the level of a full-time salary, but they will provide some important financial cushioning, which really goes a long way. That being said, from what I know, NATO has a stipend for its interns, and also the Kosovo Specialist Chambers likewise offers a pretty generous stipend compared to other organizations. The UN overall, from what I know, is still trying to get there, but is not there quite yet, and it's something that needs to be accepted as such for the moment. That's it for today. I want to thank all of you for attending this event. Again, a special thank you goes out to Laura Ferri, one of the students' assistants, who also suggested a number of the questions that we discussed today, and towards Alexandra Sharban, who monitored the questions coming in from our audience, but also to Davina Edwards for, among others, her wonderful work at advertising the event among our students and the student body. And of course, I want to say a big thank you to the 4 of you for taking the time to share your thoughts, share your experience, and your very valuable insight into what it means to get a career in international organizations. So I want to thank you.
May I share just one last thought?
Yes, please.
So it's something that we don't always talk about, but just never ever underestimate your self-care. And it will be there will be times where you have to work a lot and not sleep, but that cannot be your normal. And always take care of yourself. And there's no job that is worth your mental or physical health. That's it. Thanks.
Sure, no worries. I think it was actually a very important topic, and I hope that we can meet again, like in this format, and discuss this as well, because it is very important, the work-life balance that you should do in an internship or in working in an international organization. Any last words?